Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on creating a learning aid. One of the things I want to point out to you in this particular tutorial is that we're going to use multiple tools. When we're creating learning aids, one of the key distinctions that we need to remember is that we have to have more than just a graphics editor. Obviously, Photoshop is going to be really important to use here, but I also need an authoring tool. And in this particular case, because I'm developing a static learning aid, in this case a PDF file, I'm going to need an authoring tool that's designed to do exactly that. In my case, I've chosen Publisher, but it could be PowerPoint, it could be Microsoft Word, it could be Keynote, it could be Pages, it could be even Google Docs. The point is you need to have a plan here in your workflow to work with multiple programs, and I'm going to show you that here in just a moment. But to start off with, let's take a look at this example. In my head here, what I'm trying to do is to teach a procedure. If you remember what we read, Ruth Clark said that typically learning aids are used to develop 4 different kinds of documents. Documents that teach procedures, which is what I'm doing here. This is a software procedure. Documents that teach processes, facts, or concepts. So in this case, the procedure is using a software system, and I deliberately chose a software program that I guarantee nobody else has. And if you do, I'll be very impressed. But the software system is a navigational system for boaters. In this case, it's a program published by Garmin called Homeport. And I want to show a very simple task, how to use a tool within Garmin Homeport that allows you to measure the distance between 2 different points. So a very simple task. Now, as instructional designers and instructional developers, creating screenshot tutorials is something that's very common to expect us to be able to do. So again, the workflow here is going to use 2 different tools. In my case, it's going to be Photoshop and Publisher. When you do your homework assignment, it could be any number of authoring tools, as I said previously. So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind for your homework files, I don't necessarily want to see a screenshot tutorial like what I'm doing here. You could develop a fact-based infographic, a concept-based infographic, a process, or a procedure learning aid, just like what Ruth Clark told you. So please don't think you have to duplicate a software tutorial here. That's just one of the 4 categories that Ruth Clark mentioned, and I had to choose one. So I chose software. So here we go. So let's start at the beginning here. I chose to begin this workflow in the authoring tool itself, and this is where I'm going to create the text objects. Now you should already know how to do this. This is really simple. All I did was go up and grab the text box tool, and I created some text boxes. 1, 2, 3 different text boxes, and I actually drew a line here. I went up to the shapes tool and I grabbed the line tool and drew out some lines here just for emphasis. I also added some borders to this particular text box and then added some background colors. All of that you already know how to do. But my point is, in my head and on a piece of paper that I scribbled out, I have a wireframe design. And so I kind of know where I want to put this information. I've already written the text. Here it is. Here are the directions. And then I've got this big gap in the middle, obviously where the images are going to go. So let me switch back to the model document one more time here. These are the images. So how many do I have to deal with? Well, I got 4. I have the master shot right here, and then I have 1, 2, 3 different exploded graphics. And these are really cool. It's an advanced feature in Photoshop, and I'll show you how to do it. It's really kind of neat. You basically take a shape and you cut out a shape and then blow it up just a little bit and position it on top of the document. Now, as we learned in the module for this week, there are lots of different ways that we can set up software tutorials. I could, for example, have used a call out, a text dialog, for example, or just drawn a line here with number 1 pointing to this box and not used this exploded. But in my experience, especially when I'm dealing with screenshots that have really small icons, and that's no fault of mine. That's just how the software application authors for Garmin Homeport have designed the interface. They're very, very small icons, and I feel like my users are going to benefit if I blow up the icons just a little bit. And so using kind of an exploding technique here with this cutout tool is a great way to do that. Notice also I've got some signaling going on so that in numeric order my learners can see exactly which steps, and obviously the numbers correspond to the text diagrams or text dialogues down here. And then I've also got a little bit more signaling here with these yellow boxes around the actual tool. There's one, there's another, and then I've even got a dotted line here to symbolize some of the dragging motion. Now obviously the text directions down here articulate exactly what they're supposed to do, but the point is we're mixing in some of what Ruth Clark told us was really important to do. We've grouped everything together so we're following contiguity very well, and we're also using signaling, using these cues, these visual cues to tell the learner what to do. So with that said, let's go ahead and switch back to my publisher document one more time just to get some context here. I need to get this particular graphic in there. I know I need 4 shots. So I need a master background shot, and that's the first thing I'm going to do. So let me switch over and bring up the Garmin HomePort app. There it is. And here's the tool right here, the measuring tool that I'm trying to use. How do you measure the distance? In this case, I want to measure the distance between Little River Inlet, which is right here, and then somewhere up here around the Bald Head Lighthouse, up here by the Cape Fear River. And I know just from previous experience, all I have to do is click on the originating waypoint and then just drag over to the finishing waypoint. Let's say right there, and I can see that it's 25.2 miles. This is the shot that I want to begin with. This is my master shot. So how do I capture that screen? Now I know probably a lot of you have used screen capture utilities before, but Windows has one bundled in right away. I can just Alt print screen this, and I could just hit print screen, but Alt print screen grabs just the active application window. In other words, just Garmin HomePort window. And this is great because it now, on my clipboard, in temporary memory, I've got this image. So my next step then would be to switch to Photoshop and go ahead and create a new document and paste this screen capture that I just got. So I'll go to the File menu and select a new document, and I'll choose Image from Clipboard, or I could just start a blank file. If I choose Image from Clipboard, it's going to create a brand new document in the exact same dimensions that I captured, which is full screen 1920 by 1080. On my monitor, that's how I captured it. Yours might be different, but we can always adjust that later. So I can see now that I've got my host image. This is great. Now all I need to do is to go ahead and save this as an actual file that I can then import into my authoring tool. But before I do that, I may want to think about cropping this image. And you can see here that I've got some extra stuff on the edge. You know, sometimes when you capture full screen, you might have the taskbar down here, or you may not even want all of this. So I think the very first thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and crop this. So I'm going to select my crop tool right here, and I'm going to drag out a selection window here and then resize it so that it's full dimension. I'm going to go ahead and leave the Garmin HomePort tab in there, so that, and it'll, if you're careful with how you resize these, it'll snap to the edges nicely. I don't think I need the whole image, so I'm just going to grab this part right here, because remember, I want it kind of skinny so that I can then add some of the other call out images, these exploded ovals, and on top of them. So I don't want it to be too tall here. So when I think my crop handles are positioned correctly, I can go ahead and click on the check mark here, and now it's cropped. Now I'm ready to save. So I can go to the File menu, of course, and I can go down, and I have some options here, but I'm going to choose Save for Web. And the option that I want to use is PNG. This is all illustration. There's no photos in here. It's all line art. So I'm going to choose PNG. PNG is a more modern standard. I could, if I wanted to, choose GIF, but I'll choose PNG just because it's the more modern version of a file format that's capable of saving 24-bit graphics, especially, and they look really good even if they're just line art. If I were to use JPEG for this one, it would not look as good. There'd be a little bit of pixelation in there just due to the differences in the algorithm. So I'm going to choose PNG, but GIF could work as well. I'll click Save. and I'll choose a place for it. You can see I've been practicing here, so there are a couple. I'm going to choose Garmin.ping. That's going to be the name. You would just type yours in. And I've now saved my document. Yay! Now I'm ready to put it back into my authoring tool. So let me switch to that. So here I am back in Publisher, which was the tool that I chose. Lots of different options for you there. But I know that I want to put this image in between the text boxes here. And in Publisher, I do that from the Insert menu, and I'll choose Pictures. I'll then choose the one that I want, which was the one I saved on my desktop, Garmin PNG, and I'm going to drag it around, and I might resize it a little bit just to squeeze it down some and get it positioned about like I want it. The next step I'm going to do is to grab one of the shape tools and draw some lines down here connecting. So in Publisher, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the Shapes menu and grab this. And this way I can add some unity to the document. I'm going to drag that there, and then I might go back up and get another one and drag it down here. So give me a second and let me get this cleaned up, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, now we're ready for the right phase here. All I was trying to do was just to add some unity. You know, you remember the principle of proximity and also the principle of contiguity. You need to put similar stuff near each other. So, and I think I've done a pretty good job here with that. But I've added these lines here connecting everything. And there's no rule that says you have to do that, but if you remember the principle of alignment, everything should connect to something, whether it's visible or invisible. In this case, I think it adds a nice edge here coming down, and it'll go underneath the graphic here to connect this box with this box. So again, the whole goal here is unity. Now the next step, of course, is to make those cutout images that I can layer on top of this master image. To do that, I got to switch back to Photoshop. So I'm back in Photoshop now, and notice that my graphic looks a little bit bigger. All I did was hit the zoom button to make it larger, Control plus or Control minus. This is, I think, what it looked like before, and if I hit Control plus, now I'm up here to 100% zoom. So this is sometimes helpful so you can zoom in and zoom out. The keyboard command Control plus or Control minus. My task here is to use the cookie cutter tool in Photoshop to grab the first button that I need, and that's this one right here. I want to show them what they have to click on, the actual measuring tool within the software application that I'm training. So to do that, I'm going to switch from the crop tool to the cookie cutter tool. Now the crop tool is selected right here, and you'll notice that when it is selected, it brings up a context sensitive menu down here. One of the options here, and this is kind of hidden, it's kind of sneaky, is the cookie cutter tool, and I can switch from the crop tool to the cookie cutter tool. Now a heart shape might be appropriate for some documents, but it's definitely not for this one. I'm going to click on the shapes category here. There are a lot of different categories, but I'm going to choose shapes, and I'm going to grab this oval tool. And with that oval tool selected, you'll see I now have a set of crosshairs here, and now I can come up here and drag a shape roughly where I want it. And you'll note I can move it around so that I get just the right stuff. I can resize it even so that it focuses on just what I want to emphasize. And that's this thing right here. I'll click the checkbox, and now I've got this fantastic oval tool. What's my last step? Well, I got to export this into another PNG so I can import it into Publisher. But before I do that, I need to crop because I don't need all this empty space out here. So I'll switch back to my crop tool, and I'll simply drag a quick selection lasso, and it will snap to, and I'll resize it as appropriately. And that looks pretty good, but I'm going to leave just a little space underneath it, and I'll show you why. I'll click the checkbox. There we go. So now I've got this. I'm going to Control plus a couple times to boost it up so you can see it better. So you can see how I've got the edges cropped right here, but I've got this space down here. What do I want to do with that? Well, you remember our layers, right? One of the cool things about layers is that we can apply styles to individual layers. Now this is a really simple document. There's only one layer, but I can still go to my layer pull-down menu here, and I can choose a layer style option. Layer style and style settings, and it brings up this context sensitive menu here. And one of the things I want to do is to click a drop shadow option. And you'll notice you probably saw a little bit of a drop shadow there. I want to boost that distance a little bit. I'm going to go up to, let's say, 7. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'll click OK. Now at this level of zoom, it doesn't really look as impressive. That's okay. When we import it into the new document, it's going to look a lot better. But I need to notice this. I know the background in my document in Publisher is white, and I can see that I've got some cropped white here in my oval. That's not going to look so good. It's going to look like my oval is distorted because of this gray shape right here. So I can fix that by applying a very thin border to this layer as well. So I'm going to go back to Layer and choose Layer Style again, Style Settings. And in this case, I'm going to go to the Stroke option. Tell you what, I'll collapse the drop shadow so it's not quite as confusing. It stays checkboxed because I have a drop shadow applied, but I also want to apply a stroke here. And I'm going to leave the size at only 1 pixel, but I can drag this to any number of different sizes, and you can see it'll give you a preview. But I'm going to leave that at 1. The other thing I want to do, I think I'm going to set the opacity of that border down to about 50%, so it's not quite so obnoxious. And this is just trial and error. I know because I've already previewed this. I think 50% looks a little bit better than 100%. So I'm going to leave the border at 1 pixel and then 50%. I click OK, and there we go. And you can see I've got a very faint outline going around this. But this is really, really important because when we import it into the white background document in Publisher, it's now going to have an edge. And that's going to really help the way this looks. You'll see what I mean. Last step, of course, is to save it. And we save it the exact same way. I'm going to go down and hit Save for Web. And I'm going to choose Ping. And I'll click Save. And save it again. Let's see, what did I name it this time? Garmin Learning Aid 2. I think that's what I saved. Okay. So I choose that name. It's now saved in my folder. And I'm now ready to import it back into Publisher. So let me switch, and I'll show you how we do that. Back inside Publisher, the process works exactly the same way we put the master shot in here. I'm going to go to the Insert menu, choose Picture, and then pick it from wherever I saved it. In this case, I think that's the one, and I'll click OK, and look, there it is. I tell you what, let me zoom in here a little bit so you can see this better. And now you can see why it was so important that we had a border, a stroke, a very thin stroke applied to this button. Now I can simply position this button down here, and it's floating on top of the actual master document. And this is really, really important. It gives us contrast. This is a signaling technique. What else can I do to make this really obvious to the learner? Well, I can add some more signaling. In this case, I'm going to choose a shape tool, and I'm just going to drag out this rectangle, and I'm going to put that rectangle on top of it, and I'm going to add some shape. I'm going to take out the shape fill, and I'm going to change the line color to yellow and move the shape to none. And now I've got this nice little highlighting effect here. But you know what? That yellow, that doesn't really look right to me. It's kind of obnoxious. I think I'm going to choose a more organic color scheme, and in Publisher it has this wonderful eyedropper that I can use to switch colors. And now I'm going to change it to that yellow, and let's see how that looked. Nah, that didn't look so good either, so I'm going to switch back to Z. And maybe, I'll tell you what, I'm going to grab this orange here. That's going to be a tough grab, but I'm going to see if I can do that. So I'll switch over and go back to my format and switch over to the shape outline, grab the eyedropper tool again, and this time I'm going to grab that orange, and that looks a lot better. I guess it's kind of a yellowish color. Anyway, when I deselect, now we're in business. And if I wanted to, I could, of course, change the styling of that. I'm going to go back to Format, the Auto Shape, and I'm going to make this a little bit wider. Let me go to like about 4 points, something like that. And now you can see I've got a much more obvious signal here, a cue to the learner that, hey, you're supposed to click on this, dummy. And I'll take it even one more step further. I hope nobody was offended by that, by the way. I'll click on the draw text box tool, and I'll enter the number 1. And then I'll do some resizing here and reformatting. I'll make this a little bit bigger, boost it up some so it's much easier to see. And then I'll even change, in Publisher it gives me the option to do a text outline color, and I'm going to choose that same color that I had before for continuity, or excuse me, for consistency. And now I can position that right here, next to the object, and I've got my first step. And now this coincides with the text I've already got down there. Tell you what, the rule of proximity or the principle of proximity suggests I stick that a little bit closer. Might even make it a little bit bigger. Let's boost it up to 28. There we go. That looks better. And from here on, I just need to get the other two callouts. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll wrap this up for you. Okay, so here we are. We're back, and you can see what I've done. I went back to Photoshop, and I cropped out, using the cookie cutter tool, 2 more buttons. And I've positioned them appropriately, and I even put another line that I traced over the existing line within the software program just to add some emphasis. I chose the same colors so that I could be consistent. The colors contrast significantly so that the learner can see this, and I think this is a pretty good document now. The only problem is it's in Publisher. What's wrong with Publisher? Well, the problem is not everybody has Publisher. And if I want to get this to my learners in a format that I know they can access, I need to save it in something else. And really, there are only 2 options for static learning aids: portable document file, PDF, or HTML. We'll look at HTML saving later on. Let's focus on PDF first. This is an Adobe format. It's very popular for text documents. So how do we save that here? Well, in Publisher, it's very simple. I go to the Save As menu, and I'll choose a destination, and then I'll switch the format to PDF and then click Save. And after a few seconds, voila, there it is. There's my brand new PDF. It's now ready to import into my learning management system, my course management system, my weblog, or wherever it is, however I'm going to use this. And the key thing to remember about learning aids, again, learning aids are designed to be very, very portable. They're standalone, meaning they can provide a user just-in-time information so they can learn something really quickly, or they can be integrated in other more complex learning objects and lessons. So that's my learning aid. I want to see yours. And remember, you don't have to do a software tutorial. You can do something totally different. You can do a more complex infographic. Remember, there's usually more text in a learning aid than there is in the instructional graphics that we created last time. That was a great introductory activity. But a learning aid is a little bit more complex. So let's see what you come up with. I can't wait to see the facts, the concepts, the processes, or the procedures that you decide to create for a learning aid. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.